Pizza and his digestion adventure. Chapter 1 Mouth. The hero of the story, Pizza, starts his journey in the mouth, through the lips, of course, and this is where he meets his first of many obstacles the teeth, rows upon rows of tiny white pestle and mortars, grinding and breaking him apart. While all this is happening, the villainous salivary glands begin the chemical warfare by releasing their salivary amylase to break apart the starch within our beloved hero and turn it into maltose. After all this, the tongue and hard palate brutalize him further, forcing him into the shape of a moist ball, or bolus as they call it, and forcing him to the back of the throat. Chapter 2 Throat. After Pete's perilous misadventures in the mouth, he will begin his trip down the esophagus, or throat as some people call it, beginning with the first passage, the pharynx. As Pete travels through this, who does Pete see from the corner of his eye? None other than the epiglottis, doing its job, probably unionized, of protecting this beast's precious trachea, or air pipe. As he travels down the esophagus, Pete can feel the walls closing in around him, forcing him down to the only thing protecting him from the stomach, the cardiac sphincter. Chapter 3 Stomach. Finding himself now having been pushed into the stomach by the cardiac sphincter, Pete feels the burn of the hydrochloric acid slowly eating away at him. While this is happening, the gastric glands release their army of pepsin to slowly eat away at Pete's proteins, turning them into mere polypeptides. He tries to scream out, but he can't, probably because he doesn't have a mouth. After his painful journey through the stomach, Pete finds himself confronted with another barrier, the pyloric sphincter, and he knows that this small ring of muscle is what will thrust him into the next part of his adventure, the small intestine. Chapter 4 Small Intestine. The next step in Pete's deathly adventure is the small intestine, beginning in the duodenum. He breathes a sigh of relief as he feels the sodium bicarbonate take away the acidity that had been plaguing him since his adventures in the stomach. Little did Pete know, the pancreas only released this so its battalions of pancreatic amylase, lipase, trypsin, and nuclease could come out and tear him apart further. He can feel the amylase breaking down the remaining starch into maltose, the lipase turning his fat into glycerol and fatty acids. He had been trying to lose weight though, the trypsin breaking down the protein into polypeptides, and the worst of all, the nuclease was turning Pete's DNA into simple nucleotides. After the pancreas has had its way, the small intestine has its say, releasing soldiers of its own, its maltase, nucleosidase, and peptidase. The maltase turns his maltose into the lowest of low. It turns it into glucose. The peptidase converts his polypeptides into the simplest of amino acids, and the nucleosidase, the evilest of villains thus far, with the help of water, like all of his enzyme buddies, causes the most embarrassing change, turning his nucleotides into a sugar, phosphate group, and nitrogenous base. After the pain of the enzymes, Pete gets carried away through the small intestine, feeling the useful bits of him getting absorbed by the villi and microvilli lining the small intestine. Now let's take a break from the non-stop action of Pete's digestion adventure and talk about the liver. This is an organ in the body that has many different functions, 6 to be exact. The liver functions to synthesize bile, destroy red blood cells and convert the hemoglobin into bile components, maintain blood glucose homeostasis. It delaminates amino acids by removing the toxic amino group and converting it into urea. It manufactures plasma proteins, and it detoxifies the blood by converting harmful metabodies into less harmful substances. Now for the final chapter, the large intestine. The last part of Pete's journey is in the large intestine. Our hero, now nothing more than a wet blob void of anything helpful, travels through this last leg. Feeling the water now being absorbed from him, he sighs in resignation, now realizing his fate. He has the muscles of the large intestine push him along with peristalsis, and the water being sucked out of him. He prepares for the inevitable. The large intestine produces E. coli that breaks down the indigestible materials on him. The rest of Pete, a mostly dry lump, gets ready to be eliminated at the end of his journey through the anal sphincter.